Hey, it's Liz from No Trace, and in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to fix an old face mask where the elastic has gotten worn out. So you might know that over time, elastic tends to get old. It doesn't keep the same stretch anymore, and it's really hard to wear your mask at that point. But fixing it is actually very easy. All you need is a few simple supplies, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps. This is also a really great project to keep your reusable face masks out of the landfill and keep them back in use. So let's go. In order to fix your face mask, you need just a few simple supplies. Obviously, you need your old mask. You're going to need some scraps of fabric. They don't need to be very huge, and I'll show you how to cut them down to size. You're also going to need some new elastic or cord. So I like to use all natural materials that will eventually break down in a home compost. So I like to use natural cotton elastic or organic cotton cording. Both of these materials will eventually compost in a home compost versus the synthetic elastic, which is going to take years and years, centuries probably, to break down. So if you are working with an elastic, you'll need up to 31 or 33 inches, depending on what's comfortable for you. And if you're using a cord that doesn't have very much stretch to it, you'll need more. So this is about 45 inches of cording. You're also going to need some clips. I like to use metal binder clips, but you might have little plastic sewing clips. If you don't have any clips, you could also use pins. It's just a little bit trickier to attach, but whatever you have will work. You're also going to need a safety pin, and you're going to need scissors. So you need scissors to cut your fabric down and to trim your threads. I love to use these tiny scissors for trimming thread. And obviously a larger set for cutting the fabric to size. If you just have one pair, that's going to work fine too. And then of course you're going to need some thread and your machine and your iron. So the first step to fixing your old mask is to get rid of the old elastic. So you're going to want to go ahead and cut it as close to your mask as you can get without also cutting the mask. You want to try to keep that mask intact if you can, and just get rid of the old thread, old elastic. Okay, so this is all worn out, and this is basically landfill now, unfortunately. Okay, so in order to figure out how to cut your scraps of fabric, you're going to want to measure the height of your mask. Okay, so the height of this mask is about 3.5 inches. Okay, so you need 2 scraps of fabric, and we're basically going to be creating channels on the sides of the mask to put new elastic or cording through. So the way you figure out how to cut your scraps of fabric is you want to add 2 inches to the height of your mask. So this mask measures about 3.5 inches. So we need 2 scraps of fabric that are 5.5 inches tall, and the width is 3 inches. So regardless of how tall your mask is, you're going to want about 3 inches of width in your scraps of fabric. Now if you want to get fancy and use fabric that's the same as your mask, go for it. I'm going to just use this beige scrap fabric that I have on hand. It's organic cotton because that's the kind of material that I like to work with, and organic cotton is just so much easier on the planet and on farm workers and every living thing. So I'm going to cut 2 scraps of cotton down to size so that they are 3 inches wide and 5.5 inches tall. Now if your mask is taller than 3 inches, whatever the height is, you want to add 2 inches to the scrap of fabric because we're going to be folding down the edges to create a finished hem on the scraps. Okay, so measure your mask height, add 2 inches, and then you're going to cut your scrap 3 inches wide, and then that, whatever the height is, plus 2 inches high. Okay, so now I have my scraps of fabric. Both of them are cut to 5.5 inches tall and 3 inches wide. Now, the first step that we're going to be doing is to fold over the top edge and the bottom edge about 1/2 inch, and then take it over to the iron and press it down on both the top and the bottom edge of your scrap of fabric. Okay, so I folded over the top and the bottom edges about 1/2 inch and pressed it at the iron. So now I'm going to fold them both over again about 1/2 inch and press them at the iron. Now I'm trying to get this to be the same height as my mask. So it should be about the same height as your mask. My mask is 3.5 inches, and right now this is 3.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to press it again at the iron. So now that I've pressed them over again, I'm going to take this over to the machine and just do a straight stitch to hold down the hem that I created. And I'm not going to bother to back stitch at the start and the stop because these edges are also going to be folded in and sewn. So I'm really just going to go straight across both sides. Okay, so I've stitched across on both sides of the hem that I created, and I trimmed all of the loose threads. So now we are ready for the next step, which is to fold over the raw edges about 1/2 inch, and we are going to press that at the iron. On each side, we're folding over about 1/2 inch, and we're going to press this at the iron. Ironed the raw edges on each side about 1/2 inch. Now I fold the whole piece in half so that the raw edges are now touching each other, and I'm going to press it one more time at the iron. So now I've ironed the scrap of fabric so that it's a nice little channel, and in the next step we are going to attach this little channel to our mask. So what you want to do is just put the mask inside the channel, and I'm overlapping it about 1/2 inch and folding the channel on top of the mask. Now I want to make sure that I'm lining up the edges of the channel with one another on both sides. And I want to now clip this onto the mask so I can take it over to the machine and stitch. Now, like I said, I like to use binder clips. You can't really put these under the machine. So what I'm going to do is put one near the end of where I'm going to be sewing. And it's a little bit bulky, so you're probably going to want to take your time when you're stitching so that you can get through the multiple layers of fabric that you have here. Okay, so I've got one clip at the bottom, and then I'm going to put one clip on the side. And this is going to help hold everything together while I start my row of stitches, and then obviously I'll have to take this off as I get close to it, and then take this off as I get near the bottom. I'm going to actually do 2 rows of stitches here so that this new channel is really secured onto the mask. And like I said, the mask is on the inside. It's in about 1/2 inch so that I'm not going to be going over the old stitches and where there's even more bulk. I'm going to be sewing closer to the inside of the mask where there's a little bit less bulk of fabric versus the very end where there tends to be, you know, doubled over layers of fabric and such. So we'll take it to the machine. We're going to stitch 2 rows of stitches down along the side. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched 2 rows of stitches to attach this channel to the edge of the mask. And what I did is I just sewed straight down, lifted my presser foot, turned this around, and then sewed straight down going the other way. And when I got back to my starting point, I did a couple of back stitches over where I began my stitches so that things are really locked in place there. And you'll also want to, of course, check that you got both sides of this little scrap of fabric attached to the mask so that it's not going to come off. And I did, so it's good to go. So now that you have one side of your new mask channel for elastic sewn in place, you want to repeat all of those steps with your second scrap of fabric. So get this piece pressed and stitched and attached to the other side. All right, so both sides of the mask have new little channels sewn on with 2 rows of stitching so that they're going to stand up to, you know, a lot of wear and tear over time. So the next step is to take your safety pin, and a larger pin makes this a little easier, but use whatever you have. Now you're going to pin your pin onto your elastic, or if you're using some kind of cording, onto that. And just push the pin through the channel that you just created and get it out the other side. Now, if you're making ear loops, you can cut your length of elastic in half and then create your ear loops that way. If you want to go around the head, which I actually find a little bit more comfortable, you go through one channel, bring your safety pin over and push it in through the other channel, and you can take a moment to straighten out any twists in your elastic. It's not a huge deal. Then what you're going to do, I always recommend doing what's called an overhand knot because it's easier to undo it if you want to adjust where your knot is. So for an overhand knot with 2 strands, you're basically just placing the strands on top of each other, placing the ends of elastic on top of each other, and then holding them together, create a single knot in the elastic, and don't tighten it that hard, okay? Keep it nice and loose. This way you can try your mask on, see how the fit is, and then you can more easily move your knot down if it's too loose, or move your knot up if it feels too tight. So this knot is easier to undo than other types of knots, I have found, at least in my experience. Then the last step is to trim any loose threads. Sometimes when you thread the elastic through the channels, it'll push some threads out that you can trim with your little scissors. I don't seem to have any, which is crazy. Usually I have threads everywhere. And then you're all done. So that's all there is to it. Now that you've fixed your mask and created these little channels, you can swap out your elastic as many times as you need to. And if you can't find a cotton elastic, you can even take out the synthetic elastic when you go to wash it if you are trying to avoid, releasing any little microfibers into the water. So that's also a nice feature of these little channels. And I hope that this tutorial helped you and helped to get one of your masks back in rotation if it's been out of rotation. I know that this one is going to be back in use in my household. So thanks so much for watching, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified about all of my tutorials for zero waste sewing and low waste living tips. Thanks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.